The abduction. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the sleepy neighborhood of Pine Grove. The air was thick with the earthy scent of fresh grass, mingled with the distant hum of cicadas and the occasional chirp of birds perched high in the trees. The peaceful suburban homes, with their neat gardens and well-maintained lawns, stood like quiet sentinels beneath the warm summer sky. There was an undeniable tranquility to this corner of the world, a tranquility that would soon be shattered beyond recognition. In the Williams family backyard, 6-year-old Amy Williams was in the middle of an intense game. The small girl, with her brown pigtails bouncing with each stride, was chasing after her favorite red ball, which seemed to have a life of its own as it bounced unpredictably across the grass. She ran faster, her little legs moving with surprising agility for someone so small. The ball rolled just beyond her reach, past the stone boundary of their garden, toward the tree line at the edge of their property. Amy, without a second thought, darted after it, her heart racing with the excitement of the chase. The grass beneath her feet felt cool and soft as she sprinted, her mind focused solely on the ball. She didn't think twice about crossing the boundary her mother had always warned her not to cross. "Stay close, Amy. Don't go into the woods alone," her mother had said countless times. But to Amy, it was just a game. She could still see the house from here. The tree line wasn't far, and she had just learned how to do a proper forward roll in her defense class yesterday. She was a big girl now. As Amy ventured further into the woods, the world around her began to change. The usual sounds of nature, the rustling leaves and chirping birds, slowly faded away. The air itself felt different, heavier somehow, as if the atmosphere itself was being altered. Amy slowed her pace and instinctively glanced around, her senses tingling. It was as if the forest had become strangely silent, as if something was off, though she couldn't quite place it. She felt an unspoken warning, a small voice in her mind urging her to turn back. But her curiosity was stronger. After all, she had her ball, and the world outside her game couldn't seem so dangerous, could it? She approached the edge of the woods where the ball had come to rest. It sat motionless just at the base of an old oak tree. Amy bent down to pick it up, but before her fingers could make contact, something unusual caught her eye. The air, just above the ground, shimmered in a perfect circular pattern. It wasn't like the heat waves that rise off the pavement on a hot day. This shimmer was different, solid, unnerving, as if the very air had been bent, like a curtain of energy was hanging just out of reach. Amy stood frozen for a moment, her young mind trying to process what she was seeing. A soft hum seemed to vibrate through the ground beneath her feet, the low-frequency sound barely audible, but oddly powerful. She stepped back, her small foot making an instinctive retreat, but the shimmer only grew stronger, more defined. She knew something was wrong now. Her hand instinctively went to the small pendant around her neck, the one her father had given her for her birthday just last month. He had told her never to take it off, to keep it close. "This is to keep you safe, Amy. Always remember, you are never alone," he had said, his tone unusually serious for a man who typically radiated warmth and humor. Amy's small fingers tightened around the pendant, her heart racing. Something told her she might need its protection now more than ever. Suddenly, the shimmering air intensified. Before Amy could react, the world around her seemed to distort, and a beam of pale blue light shot down from the sky, enveloping her in a brilliant glow. Amy gasped, her eyes wide with both fear and wonder. The blue light pulsed softly, a steady rhythm that made her feel as though she was standing at the edge of some impossible dream. Within seconds, the ground beneath her feet began to tremble, and the soft hum turned into a loud whirring sound, as if the very atmosphere had been manipulated by unseen forces. Amy tried to scream, but no sound escaped her lips. The world around her seemed to be pulled away, as though she was being lifted by invisible hands. Back at the Williams home, inside the kitchen, Tom and Jane Williams were preparing dinner, their movements rhythmic and practiced. The soft clink of dishes and the sizzle of food on the stove filled the house, creating the familiar, comforting sound of an evening at home. It was a moment of simple happiness, the kind of day where the worries of the world seemed distant and far away. But then, their quiet domestic bliss was suddenly interrupted. The security system in their home emitted a soft chime, signaling an alert on their phones. Both Tom and Jane's faces went pale as they read the message that appeared on their screens. "Tom, what's happening?" Jane whispered, her voice tight with alarm. Before Tom could answer, his hands were already on the keyboard of his terminal, typing furiously. "I can't believe it," he muttered, his voice shaking. "It's happening. They've taken her." Both parents rushed to the back door, their hearts pounding in their chests. They barely registered the cool evening air as they stepped into the yard, their eyes searching the space in a frantic scan. Jane's breath caught as she looked up into the sky and saw the fading blue light that had once been so bright, now retreating rapidly into the heavens. There was no doubt in her mind. Their daughter, Amy, was gone. A scream tore from Jane's throat, not one of despair, but one of pure, seething rage. "No," she cried. "No, they did not just take my child." Tom's face was set with a grim determination. "I'll find her," he said through clenched teeth, his voice thick with fury. "I'll bring her back." His fingers moved swiftly across his computer terminal as he activated the tracking system built into Amy's pendant. The familiar hum of the tracking device filled the room, and the coordinates flickered to life on the screen. "Got it," Tom said, his voice taut with controlled anger. "They're still in low orbit." Before Jane could speak, she was already moving, pulling out her secure phone. "This is Colonel Williams," she spoke firmly into the receiver. "Authorization code Alpha 7 Delta 9. We have a code black. I repeat, code black. They took my daughter." The response from the other end was immediate, and within moments, the sounds of sirens began to wail across the city. The military was now activated, but Jane's mind was already focused on one singular task: to get her daughter back. The unseen forces. The Williams family's suburban home, once the picture of calm, had rapidly transformed into something far more intense. Jane stood at the center of a whirlwind of activity as military personnel swarmed through the house, converting rooms into makeshift command centers. The usual quiet of the Williams household had been replaced by the relentless buzz of military efficiency. Jane's thoughts were razor-sharp, her instincts honed through years of military training. She moved like a machine, directing her team with precision. Gone was the caring mother of a young girl. In her place stood Colonel Jane Williams, former commander of Earth's Special Operations Unit 7, known in military circles as the Ghost Makers, a reputation that had once been built on the quiet efficiency of dealing with the impossible. Now it was more relevant than ever. Her eyes were cold, focused, but beneath that steely exterior, a fire burned. Amy had been taken, and no force on Earth, or beyond, was going to stand in her way. 3 children, 3 disappearances in 1 month, she said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "This isn't random anymore. This is a pattern." Her words were calm, but they hit like thunder. She knew, deep down, that whatever was happening, it was no accident. Something bigger was at play, and Amy was now at the center of it. Across the room, Tom worked furiously at his station, his fingers dancing across multiple screens as he accessed satellite data. His face, usually one of calm intellect, was now drawn and tense. His eyes darted from screen to screen as he inputted various algorithms, cross-referencing locations and data points. The quantum tracker was online, functioning perfectly, but it still felt like they were grasping at shadows. "They're still in low orbit, but they're preparing to jump to faster-than-light travel," Tom said, his voice thick with worry. "This tracking system is better than anything we've got, but they've cloaked their ship, and it's doing everything it can to hide from us. It's just a matter of time before they go beyond our reach." Jane didn't hesitate. She glanced over at the general who had entered the room with a grave expression. "This changes everything," the general said, his voice laced with disbelief. "The other two families, those weren't connected to the military. We had to keep up the facade that we were just a primitive species. But now, they've crossed the line." Jane's hard gaze met his. "No more fuckheads. They've taken the wrong child, General. Amy wasn't just any little girl. She's the daughter of Colonel Jane Williams, and that mistake is going to cost them dearly." The general gave a stiff nod. "Permission granted. Activate the fleet." The command was given with an icy finality, and it reverberated through the entire military network like a thunderclap. Within moments, hidden bases around the world began to stir to life. Earth's secret defense infrastructure, previously concealed from the public eye, sprang into action. The veil of secrecy that had protected these hidden operations for so long was lifted in an instant. The world was about to learn that humanity wasn't as weak as the collective thought. In the depths of the Pacific Ocean, massive hangar doors began to rumble open, revealing sleek ships designed for combat. In Antarctica, the hidden ice caves, which had once been nothing more than a place of mystery, now revealed their true purpose, housing Earth's most advanced weaponry and spacecraft. In the dense Amazon rainforest, an entire mountain split apart to reveal a fully equipped space carrier, long thought to be a myth, now ready for battle. At the same time, the collective research vessel, still hovering in low orbit, was preparing for its jump to FTL. Inside, the lead researcher sat calmly at the helm, reviewing the data of their captive subject, Amy Williams. His assistants monitored her every move as she stood in the center of her containment cell, seemingly calm despite the circumstances. They had expected fear, panic, confusion, the typical response from the human young. But Amy was anything but typical. "She shows remarkable calm," the lead researcher observed, his voice betraying a hint of curiosity. "This human specimen appears to be more intelligent than we anticipated. Perhaps their emotional development is less advanced than we originally thought." One of his assistants, who had been watching Amy closely, nodded in agreement. "Indeed, she doesn't appear to exhibit the usual signs of distress. Fascinating. It seems the subject is less emotionally developed. We may have underestimated this species." But Amy wasn't frightened. Not in the way they expected. Her eyes darted around the cell, carefully cataloging every detail in her mind. The ventilation system, the door mechanism, the movements of the guards stationed outside the cell. Her small fingers were clasped tightly around the pendant her father had given her. It was the only thing she could rely on in this alien environment. She had no idea where she was or what was happening, but she knew one thing: she wasn't going to panic. Amy smiled slightly to herself, remembering what her mother always said during their games of I Spy. "Sometimes, sweetheart, the best thing to do is to let them think you're harmless." The collective had made a critical mistake. They had underestimated humanity, and they were about to learn a hard lesson about the resilience, intelligence, and determination that humanity possessed, even in the smallest of its members. Back on Earth, Jane was already mobilizing her resources, preparing for what would become the largest military operation Earth had ever known. The fleet was ready, and so was she. Every instinct in her being told her that the fate of her daughter, and humanity, was about to change forever. The first of the ships, a sleek fighter, emerged from its hidden hangar deep beneath the ocean's surface, cutting through the water with silent precision. The fighters were equipped with advanced weaponry, far superior to anything the collective had ever seen, and they were ready to launch. Jane stood at the heart of the command center, now surrounded by the full might of Earth's military forces, and the orders rang out with relentless precision. "Prepare for launch. All ships, engage cloaking technology. We're going to show them what Earth is capable of." The ships took off into the sky, and across the globe, humanity began its counteroffensive. The collective researchers, still unaware of the forces rising against them, continued their observations. The young human subject, Amy, remained in the containment cell, calm as ever, but a shift was coming. The collective, in their ignorance, believed that humanity was a primitive species, incapable of comprehending the vastness of the universe. They had assumed that Amy, like every other human they had encountered, would break under pressure. They were wrong. The battle for Amy's freedom was about to begin, and humanity was ready to remind the galaxy just why they should never, ever take a human child. The final stand. The moon hung like a silver sentinel above the Earth, watching over the unfolding conflict below. Humanity's forces had mobilized, their ships now spread across the expanse of space, cloaked and silent, ready to strike. The collective, still unaware of the full scope of humanity's response, prepared to engage in what they thought would be a simple observation mission, a standard procedure for their research. But as the vast fleet of human warships emerged from behind the moon, the collective's leader, the chief researcher, suddenly felt a cold chill run down his spine. His sensors began to beep urgently as the data on the display in front of him shifted in unexpected ways. Energy signatures detected, the junior researcher reported, his voice shaking. Multiple vessels. Their trajectories. They're not following standard protocols. The collective had studied Earth for centuries, had observed its military tactics and its space technology. They had believed themselves to be invincible, watching from the safety of their cloaked ships, with no fear of retaliation from a species they considered primitive and weak. Yet now, the tables were turning. Humanity wasn't simply defending itself. They were launching an all-out counteroffensive. They were coming for Amy, and they were coming for them. The lead researcher watched the screens in stunned silence. The human vessels that appeared were not like anything they had expected. They weren't clumsy, outdated models. These ships were sleek, stealthy, and powerful, designed for one thing: combat. As they emerged from their hidden positions, cloaking devices flickering off in a flash, they revealed themselves to be far more formidable than the collective had ever imagined. The ship carrying Amy, the vessel that had abducted her, was still in orbit, hovering silently as it prepared to jump to faster-than-light speeds. The research team had been eager to return to their home planet with the specimen in tow, confident that this was just another small step in their grand plan of observation and extraction. They had thought nothing of the humans' ability to stop them. But now, they saw their mistake. The humans weren't just fighting for their child. They were fighting for their very place in the cosmos, for their right to exist beyond the judgment of the collective. Back on Earth, Colonel Jane Williams watched the live feeds from her command center, her face expressionless. She didn't need to say anything. Her soldiers understood the gravity of the situation. The time for negotiation was over. The time for diplomacy had passed. Amy's abduction had been the spark that ignited a fire they couldn't extinguish. The countdown began. "Launch all fighters," Jane ordered, her voice calm but full of steel. "We're not just rescuing a child. We're sending a message." The fighters streaked across the sky, cutting through the atmosphere with a speed and precision the collective had never anticipated. Their engines screamed as they broke the sound barrier, rapidly gaining altitude toward the fleet in orbit. But as they soared, Jane's thoughts stayed focused on the mission at hand. Nothing else mattered but retrieving Amy and ensuring that the collective would never again underestimate humanity. Meanwhile, Amy, still aboard the alien research vessel, had been studying her surroundings with a quiet determination. Her small cell was cold, but she had already mapped it in her mind. The ventilation ducts. The glass panel where guards occasionally passed by. The door. The guards themselves. In a strange way, it was like a game. One of her mother's games, but this time the stakes were far higher. As the collective researchers continued to focus on their analysis of Amy, they were blissfully unaware of the chaos brewing around them. Amy had already figured out how to outsmart them. She wasn't just the daughter of a military commander. She had inherited her mother's resourcefulness and her father's tactical intelligence. It wasn't long before she found the key to her escape, a small, seemingly innocuous device hidden in the cell's wall, probably used for monitoring. With a swift move, she was able to disable it, and the door to her containment cell slowly slid open. She didn't hesitate. Annie had one goal in mind: to get out, to find her parents, and to stop the collective from ever coming back. The moment the door opened, a soft hiss echoed through the hallway, alerting the guards. But Annie was already moving, slipping past the startled alien sentries with incredible speed and agility. She didn't have much time, but she knew her instincts would guide her. She didn't need to be brave. She needed to be smart. Meanwhile, Jane's forces continued to close in on the alien research vessel. The fighters were already in position, ready to strike, their weapons primed and locked. The larger warships were lined up in formation, prepared to disable the collective ship and reclaim Amy. The stakes couldn't be higher. They weren't just fighting for a child. They were fighting for their right to remain free from alien control, for their sovereignty as a species. As Jane's voice rang out over the comms, her orders were clear. Target the vessel's propulsion systems. Disable them. We're not here to destroy, only to take back what's ours. The first volley of energy blasts hit the research ship, shaking it violently. The collected shields flickered, and the vessel's cloaking system sputtered, revealing its true form to the humans in orbit. The researchers on board scrambled, trying to react to the sudden attack. But it was too late. Humanity had already caught them in the act. Inside the research ship, Amy had reached the control room. She had avoided the guards, navigating through the hallways as though she had known them her entire life. The panel in front of her hummed with alien symbols, but Amy's fingers moved with an innate understanding of technology. It was almost as if the pendant her father had given her, his final gift, had unlocked a deeper layer of potential within her. She activated the comm system, sending out a signal to the fleet of human ships that had gathered in orbit. The moment the transmission was received, a burst of hope surged through the commanders. They knew Amy was alive. They knew she was about to escape. The collective, however, had no idea what hit them. Their ship began to tremble as human forces launched a second, more devastating round of attacks. The warships took position, targeting the vulnerable weak points of the vessel. The shields shattered, and in that moment, the ship was exposed for all to see. In a final desperate attempt to save the ship, the lead researcher attempted to order a jump to faster-than-light speeds, but it was too late. The engines were disabled, and the ship was trapped in orbit. They had no way out. With Amy safely aboard the human fleet, and the collective ship on the brink of destruction, Jane Williams stood at the helm of her ship, staring out into the vastness of space. Her mission was complete, but the message had been sent. "Let the galaxy know," she said, her voice steady, "that humanity is no longer a species to be underestimated. The collective's arrogance had cost them dearly, and they would never forget the day they learned why you should never take a human child."